Hi everyone. It's very nice to be here again towards the second day of our roundtable. So very nice to see you all again here. So my name is Joana Pedro and I'm leading the social work within UNEP FI. And I'm today very happy to be joined here by Anouj Mehta in the end there, who is the country director of Thailand for ADB, the Asian Development Bank. I have Yuki Yasui, who is the managing director of the Asia Pacific network of GFANZ. And I also have Masayuki Takanashi, who is the Group Chief Sustainable Officer and General Manager of the Corporate Sustainability Department within Sumitomo Mitsui Financial Group. Thank you all for joining me here. So last year in July, the UN General Assembly has unanimously agreed that human rights to a healthy environment is recognized as a human right. And this legal recognition has strengthened this relationship that we've been speaking towards during these 2 days already about the social and the environmental agendas. And in climate change specifically, we cannot separate the impacts of climate change and people. So normally and often poorest and vulnerable people are the ones more affected by climate change, even if the ones that less contributed to it. But often also happens that they are the ones that are more disproportionately affected when we are trying to transition, when we are applying the mitigation and adaptation measures that we need to do in order to deal with climate change. So when we speak about just transition, it does speak about maximizing the social and economic opportunities that comes from climate action to communities and people, but also to minimize and careful look at the challenges and at the impacts that come. So how can we work on having decent work opportunities? How can we work in leaving no one behind when doing the transition to a lower carbon economy? So as the transition and decarbonization in general is more and more of a topic with the reason for it, just transition also becomes more and more in the agenda, and we are having a lot of high-level discussions around that. The Paris Agreement does recognize just transition as a need. So, I mean, in this panel we are trying, so we were just discussing before, and we are still practical, solutions are still not so many, but we are working on it, and in this panel we'll hope to look a bit on what are the challenges, where are the opportunities, where are the things that are already out there that we can do, and how to move forward. So Yuki, I would start with you. So you were actually working at UNEP FI for quite a while, and now you were in GFANZ and working in the region. What do you think are the biggest challenges and opportunities for the just transition in the region?
Yeah, thank you, Joana. So good afternoon, everyone. My name is Yuki Yasui from GFANZ. I'm the managing director at the APAC network based in Singapore. Just a very brief description of GFANZ in case you don't know us. So we are effectively an alliance of the alliances. So there are Net Zero Banking Alliance and Net Zero Asset Owner Alliance, and there are other, in total, 8 Net Zero Alliances that make up GFANZ, the Glasgow Financial Alliance for Net Zero. So if you are signed up to an NZ Alliance, you are automatically regarded as a GFANZ member. And so globally, we are a group of over 570 financial institutions around the world, covering 50 countries and making up about 40% of the financial assets globally. So it is a significant coalition. So to answer your question about the opportunities and challenges of just transition, I think just transition is very regionalized and very geographically specific. So what is the important just transition aspects in one country might not be the same in another country. So in Asia, I mean, normally just transition focuses a lot around jobs and communities, but there are other considerations as well. And so at GFANZ APAC Network, we're working on providing guidance for financial institutions in financing the managed phase-out of coal-fired power plants in Asia. And there, our just transition considerations are not just about jobs and communities, which are important, but also the other considerations that have come up is how do you make sure that when you try and turn off a coal-fired power plant early, that it's not going to disrupt the energy system, and that people can still have access to energy, and that the access to energy is affordable as well. Because in Asia, there is still quite a lot of electrification to do, and we want to make sure that decarbonization does not disrupt the people's access and the ability to access energy. So that's a key point in the discussion around the energy transition in Asia. Other social issues considerations, if you, I guess broadening the discussion further, you could think about your engagement with small, medium-sized enterprises as part of a just transition as well. I mean, it's a commercial relationship that you have, but it's also a community issue. And especially where communities have got clusters of SMEs in a particular sector that is hard to abate and hard to transition, I think there we need to see it more from a social perspective to make sure that it's not just about your relationship, but also about the community relationship and how you are working with the local government as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Yuki, for those also views from the region. Thank you so much. Masayuki, I would pass to you. So SMBC has been participating in the Principles for Financing a Just and Urgent Energy Transition, which were principles aiming at accelerating funding and collaboration in Japan, which are both key in achieving just and urgent energy transition. Could you let us know a bit more about the principles in itself, and also why did the organization find important to be part of the group working on it?
Yes, thank you very much. And first of all, thank you very much for giving me this opportunity to talk here. Yes, as you explained, SMBC, we have participated in the Principles for Financing a Just and Urgent Energy Transition, or short, we call it JUIT principles, in November, this was 2021, at COP26. And what that is it's basically an initiative to help mobilize investment and accelerate financing for just energy transition in, especially developing countries. And this started from the World Economic Forum, and there are numbers of organizations, including HSBC, Prudential from the private sector, but also, people like International Trade Union, Confederation, Private Infrastructure Development Group, and WWF, for instance, and we joined as well. This initiative consists of 8 principles designed to guide investment and financing decision and facilitate collaboration among stakeholders. The 8 principles were, first of all, support country plans to replace coal-fired power plants, invest in programs to ensure just transition, structure financing to ensure coal-fired plants are replaced by low emission capacity. Fourthly, create opportunity for asset owners of coal-fired plants to recycle their proceeds related to their investment, retirement, into the development of renewables. Number 5 was provide technology transfer and technical assistance to enable large-scale expansion of renewable energy. 6, contribute to the development of large-scale bespoke energy transition financing. And 7th, actually, they talked about carbon markets as well, leverage the carbon market. and also urgently drive large-scale investment. They said there's no time to lose. So those were the 8 principles that we agreed with. The reasons that we joined the principle was basically the concept was very much aligned with what we think sustainability is. We actually do have a definition of sustainability in our company, and it says that we want to create a society in which everyone in today's generation can enjoy economic prosperity and well-being, and also pass that on to the future generation. We did think that was completely in line with what we think sustainability should be. And secondly, again, to have a sustainable and decarbonized society, a just transition, again, we do think is very, very important. So those were the main reasons that we joined the principles. And as a financial institution that has a large carbon footprint in Asia, obviously we don't think the answer to a decarbonized society is just to divest, and we believe that it's very, very essential for us to support our customers going forward as well.
Thank you so much for explaining us a bit better on the principles, but also on your vision for sustainability, which is very interesting, and how it connects again the social and environmental in one, being the 2 sides of the same coin, as it was mentioned also this morning. Anouj, I would now go to you. You're a bit far now. So ADB has launched a platform to support just transition. Could you tell us a bit more about the platform, and also how you think that platform can help financial institutions to embed just transition within their work?
Sure, thank you, and thank you for having ADB here. Thank you to the UNEP, and good to see so many old friends and colleagues over here. Just stepping back, for those of you who probably already know ADB, the Asian Development Bank is a multilateral development bank headquartered in Manila, offices in most of Asia Pacific, and heavily involved in supporting our countries, developing member countries around the region, in developing development projects which have an effect on equity, affordability, and themes, most importantly, climate. And ADB's got a big focus on climate finance with the aim of mobilizing $100 billion in climate finance by 2030, which it is well on track to do already over the last 4 years. So now I mention that because we have a very close role, or a very important role to play, and have been playing with governments across the region, as well as the private sector, in developing projects which are really developmental. So as a result of that, you see a lot of things emerging. So we see projects emerging at a country level, which could be focused on transport or energy or water supply, which is, let's build something. So it's an infrastructure project. At the same time, we also work a lot on programs with countries which are policy. So can we help the country put a policy together for PPP or for climate finance, or can we help support NDCs? So I think what we see as we move forward, especially on the climate agenda, is that there is a lot of need to skill up a lot of agencies, entities across the region with their enabling environments, with their capacities in terms of dealing with just transition. So you're no longer talking about just saying, let's build a BRT project. We are not just saying, let's remove the emissions from two-wheelers and cars by building a great BRT project. You need to also think about what is the effect of removing those two-wheelers on people. So in terms of access, a lot of people find two-wheelers cheap, affordable. It's easy to use the small roads. What is the impact of that on the design of that particular project? It's a big issue from a just transition perspective if you bring it down to that level, if you bring it down to a practical issue. So what we are trying to do is, while we are of course working on different initiatives and projects for climate finance, we've set up this platform, the one that you asked me about, Just Transition Platform for Asia Pacific, which does two things. The plan over the next 3 years is to support developing member countries in Asia Pacific at two levels. One is at the program level. So at the policy level, how do we help countries understand what is just transition for them? Because each country will have a different approach perhaps to what is the most important aspect of just transition for them. Informal, gender equality, different regions. So policy level, capacity building, development of country partnership programs, that's one part of it. Very much upstream, very much program and policy development. And then downstream, it also says that in specific countries, how do we develop model just transition projects? So this is saying, can we develop projects or initiatives which can demonstrate practically what is just transition? As an example of that, we've already started working in Indonesia and a few other countries in Southeast Asia on something called the energy transition mechanism. So it says, how do we work on moving from fossil fuel to renewables, etc., on energy specifically? So here is a financial mechanism, and the just transition platform comes in to say, okay, finance, and then how does the just transition aspect get integrated into the design of that energy transition mechanism so that it really is a just transition for all the society and community. And, and that, is even more important for other sectors, because I think if you move away from energy, a lot of focus is on energy transition. But 40%, for more than 40% of the greenhouse gas emissions are from non-energy sectors, your agriculture, which wouldn't have even thought about, a few years earlier. Water supply, transport, of course. How do we develop specific models there? So the platform is a technical assistance, it's grant-based, which is trying to work with countries and with programs at a policy level and project level. And that's the intention of the ADB's Just Transition platform. Back to you.
Thank you so much. I think it's very important, this dimension also, that you speak about different actors working together. So it's not something that one sector can put it forward. It needs to be something done together. So it's very interesting that you are working at these different levels to enable the environment for the work to be done. Yuki, at the moment, GFANZ is working on a project on dephasing coal. So if you can just, in the region, so if you can just let us know a bit more about the project, but also about how you're embedding just transition within that specific work.
Yeah, thank you. I think it kind of relates to what the speaker has just said about the ETM, the Asia Development Bank's energy transition mechanism. So in Asia, a lot of the coal-fired power plants are very young, and it does need to be, the retirement of those need to be accelerated if we are to achieve net zero by 2050, or at least the Paris Climate Agreement. So we are and this is not just about, the public finance like ADB doing it, but ADB is trying to pull in the participation of commercial finance here. So at GFANZ, we've been looking at developing guidance around how financial institutions can participate and support a transaction on an early retirement of coal, what we call the managed phase-out of coal-fired power plants in Asia-Pacific. And in Asia-Pacific, there's actually 5,500 coal power generators. And IEA says that globally, 40% needs to be retired by 2030. So, and then, by 2040, non-OECD countries should have retired as well completely. So we are running against the clock, and we have hardly any successful transactions so far. ADB has been piloting the first few, and there's been a few, handful in Asia that have been done privately. So there is a need for guidance, and the guidance is what we are trying to develop at GFANZ. One of the things, so there are three key considerations of within our guidance that we think are important for financial institutions to participate in a managed phase-out transaction. One is the credibility. So how do you assess whether the transaction is a credible transaction? How can you distinguish a loan or a project that is just supporting the coal asset to survive another decade or two? what is the distinction there? So credibility, establishing the credibility is really the difficult one. The second one is the financial viability, because the assets are young, that means that there is a lot of cash flow that people have calculated when they were investing in these coal assets. But if you're trying to retire them 10 years early, or even 5 years, the present value, how can we make sure that the investors or the person taking on this new commitment to manage phase out are able to financially see it as a commercial venture? So for that, we're looking at new financing structures and restructuring, but also blended finance being a very important role. So how can we bring in government money, philanthropic money, and how can we make sure that they are catalytic? So not that they are subsidizing, but de-risking the project. And then thirdly is carbon credits. And carbon credits on managed phase out is a new area that a lot of those working on carbon credits are looking at. It's a very niche area at the moment, but they also rely on the credibility of the managed phase out as well. And then the last pillar, which is really the underlining pillar, is the just transition. So how can we make sure that the managed phase out transaction has considered the just transition elements? And as I was saying earlier, for coal managed phase out, a lot of the issues are around the affordability and the accessibility. The labor and reskilling and community is also another key area as well. And in terms of what the role of finance is in ensuring managed phase out, ensuring the just transition of managed phase out, is that we take it as an extension of your normal due diligence around human rights. I think if you follow what you have been doing on human rights due diligence, you can consider the just transition elements along the same line as well. And that will be your practical way of assessing your role in the project. But also to mention that the just transition consideration of financial institutions is not just due diligence of the entity that you are supporting and of the assets, but also it is extending to the government, the local government or the national government, and making sure that they are brought into the discussion and that the more holistic approach is done on the energy transition. So managed phase out transaction is one transaction, but it needs to be part of a holistic plan of the government and the local government as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Yuki. I think this is a very interesting project, and we're very looking forward to see I believe that in June it will be in public consultation. So
Just
will be
to say that the consultation report of this guide will be out on the 5th of June. So the consultation will happen from the 5th of June until early August, and we encourage you to participate in and give us feedback so that the final report is good. Thank you.
Thank you. And I think, Anouj, Yuki just mentioned this within her answer, also this question of de-risking. And indeed, one of the things that we often hear from commercial financial institutions is that when we speak about green and social projects, we often speak about a bigger risk. And of course, these are institutions that often are risk adverse. So how do you think what can be done to de-risk these projects and to support financial institutions in entering in these projects?
Excellent, and a super important issue which Yuki-san has brought up. Again, stepping back and why it's so important. I think ADB did something like around $20 billion last year in lending and projects. The requirement for financing is 1.6 trillion or something like that per year, which changes, of course. If you look at areas like biodiversity, and I'm mentioning that for a reason, I think globally it's 711 billion per year or something similar. So the amount of financing needs are so massive that you need the private sector. Now, what is the private sector? You can have strategic private sector, PPPs. You can have the institutions, commercial banks, pension funds, insurance companies, or you can have instruments such as bonds. Green bonds, blue bonds, huge way of raising finance in the West for infra, but not so much here yet. So how do we make this money happen? When you look at the underlying projects like classic infrastructure, your roads, your bridges, your airports, etc., you still have a revenue stream. The revenue stream may or may not be well defined, but generally in the sector it can be developed. And then you've got other risk issues, dispute resolution, contracts, etc. Then you step down even further from climate into nature, biodiversity. You have no revenue lines. In a large part of nature or biodiversity projects, coastal protection, sea erosion, wildlife. So in all of these areas, you need to do something which is a little innovative in terms of money. So what we've been trying at ADB, which is heavily focused on de-risking, in the ASEAN region, we created a fund called the ASEAN Catalytic Green Finance Facility, ACGF. It's owned by all the countries in Southeast Asia. It's managed by a team in ADB. It's been about 4 years now running. And its main aim is, how do we de-risk green projects in Southeast Asia to become bankable? It's got about $2 billion now from a number of donors, etc. What it does is two things. One is the project preparation. However much one says about project preparation, you can say a lot more. The biggest issue in many of our countries in infrastructure is bad project preparation. It really requires a lot of support, especially when you're going down into climate. There's still a lack of understanding on what exactly is a climate impact or a green taxonomy, etc. So one part of the fund is better project preparation, which is not just about the best technologies or the climate design, but also about the innovative finance model, because you're also trying to reduce the pressure on the government. That's the upstream, project preparation. Downstream, the fund basically says we can provide de-risking to projects in a number of different ways. So this is use of funds through the sovereign, which can de-risk a project either upstream, so you can reduce the cost of capital of a project. So reduce the amount of financing required by the private sector upstream, finance in capital expenditure. But equally, it can be de-risking on the revenue side. So in many areas where the revenue lines are not clear, the facility can provide funding, which basically says it's a revenue support for a few years. It could also provide a guarantee. So if you're trying to say to a city government, you want to do a bond issuance to raise blue bonds for a blue project, it can provide a guarantee to investors who want to come in for a number of years. And so we are using CapEx, OpEx, or guarantees. And so I think that's a big part of the de-risking, which is very practical. One other thing I want to mention is instruments. And I mentioned right at the beginning, places like green blue bonds or biodiversity credits, which a lot of people are talking about, are fairly untested instruments in Southeast Asia, fairly untested. So one of the things we're trying to do at ADB is develop some of these instruments with governments. There's an initiative in Thailand that we've launched called GSS Bonds Initiative, which is saying, can we help governments do those signature bonds? The first time you've done a green bond or a sustainability bond, etc., work them through the system so that it demonstrates that it works, that there are underlying projects, mechanisms to monitor, etc., and it sends a strong signal that the next and the third and the fourth tranches for those instrument issuances will be very credible. And that's another way that we're going around it, which I think you'll also see work emerging from us on nature and biodiversity in similar ways. I hope that helps.
Okay, thank you. That's very helpful, and I think we're all looking forward to see how those pilot examples will turn out and if they will be expanded in the region. So very looking forward to see that. Masayuki, I think, so you've been working directly on corporate strategy on sustainability. So you know well the challenges within a private sector to go forward with that. And specifically on just transition and inclusive transition, what do you see as the main challenges, but also the main incentives to actually move forward in that direction?
Yeah, Well, thank you very much. Obviously, we are a financial institution and not necessarily a company that has coal-fired plants. That said, I think there are some challenges that we have in common. We also, the energy transition journey does have an impact on financial institutions as well, and we also need to transition as well. So there are challenges on our side that probably there are some commonality between our financial institutions and other corporates as well. Mainly, I think there are three areas. Obviously, we need to manage the expectation and from various stakeholders. One, shareholders and investors. You know, for instance, if it's banks, shareholders and investors expects our bank to reduce our scope 3 emissions, which is sometimes called finance emissions. But some other shareholders worry about our, the reduction of our profitability. So we need to think about that as well. We can't leave our clients behind as well. Clients expect us to, you know, kind of continue the relationship that we have had. So we need to take care of our clients as well. Employees is another big stakeholder that face, for instance, if it's our banks, the workers, the employees that face our clients directly, they might have to change their jobs also. So we, as a bank, also have to do a just transition. Obviously, there's no easy answer in meeting all expectations, but I think the careful and thorough engagement and communication is key for just transition. For instance, with regards to our shareholders and investors, what we have been doing is that we have been communicating that a simple reduction of our finance emissions will not allow just transition, and we have created our net zero roadmap to show that our strategy, and this we communicate directly and also through various disclosures. And actually, I think it was yesterday, we did disclose what we call our transition finance playbook. This is a playbook to show to various stakeholders what we think is transition finance, so our definition of transition finance. In that, we also have a just transition principle in the playbook as well. And we do the same thing as with our clients, and obviously we have to explain to our clients that we have no intention to divest or leave clients behind, and we would like to discuss how we can transition together. And obviously banks now provide very sustainable finance solutions to provide incentives for our clients to transition as well. With regards to employees, I think tone from the top is very important. Our CEO has made clear that the energy transition is a risk, but also a big opportunity for our bank and the society, and that we have created many business opportunities related to climate change as well. So maybe not just banks, but other corporates that are transitioning might be able to do the same as well. We have various training programs in the bank for retraining our employees, especially bankers that are facing the sectors that need to transition. Obviously, I'm aware that this is not that simple in the energy sector, and in those cases, I think the public and private sector partnership is very, very essential. For instance, back in the 1960s in Japan, Japan really was heavily reliant on coal mining sector. To help the just transition of the works in the mining sector, the Japanese government spent 4 trillion yen to fund various policy measures. I think recently in Europe as well, the European Commission has launched just transition mechanisms, and something very similar in Germany as well. So I guess partnership between the public and private sector is very, very important. Obviously, we are seeing transition bonds and blended finance transactions that have incentives tied to transition and also provide support for worker training as well. So I guess we need to see much, much more of these transactions as well. That's it for me.
Thank you so much. I think it's also very impressive to think that indeed in Japan this process of decarbonization happened a couple of decades ago, and that there is a way forward and it is possible to do. So I think that's a good example also for us to take for what is needed to be done now. So we are unfortunately out of time, so we'll have to move for the next session. Thank you so much all for joining me here. I think also just to say that, of course, we are all in a lot of ways in the beginning of the discussion on just transition, even if it's something that has been on for a bit, but in terms of concrete ideas, we are also from UNEP FI side working on a guidance for both banks and insurances on how to embed just transition within their operations. So if you are interested on that, do contact me or contact UNEP FI, and we're very happy to share more information about that as well. So thank you so much for joining me here.